Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Lemon Williams, CISO at Pine Gate Renewables. Lemon, welcome to the show.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyber, Lynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past theirs. That's where Cyberlinks comes in. We partner with the best cybersecurity companies in the world to be able to provide our clients with the best solutions at the best prices. So whether it's managed SIM, SOC, EDR, MDR, XDR, you name it, we'll help you find the right solution at the right price. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyber, Lynx.com. And now back to our show. Lemon, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Pine Gate Renewables and your role there as CISO?
Sure. Pine Gate Renewables is a utility-scale solar power developer, owner, and operator. They're based out of Asheville, North Carolina, but they actually operate in 33 states. And they are the owners and builders of some of the largest solar power plants in the country.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, everybody loves renewable energy. So I think that's a very, relevant and topic, and topical thing, renewables, AI. So as a CISO and a renewable energy, I mean, infrastructure is always a target, if you will, right? So is that something that kind of keeps you up at night?
There's multiple things that keep me up at night. Usually things that keep me up are worried about the things that I'm not thinking about that are going to get me. But absolutely, energy is highly regulated. Also, it's very central to just national security, our way of life. So there's a lot of heightened awareness around what could happen there. Obviously, we're connected to the power grid, and that's very essential to the overall supply of electricity. So our approach is, always keeps that in mind, that we have a huge responsibility, and that what we do is critical. So a lot of what we concern ourselves about overall as a strategy is we're a mid-sized company. And so in terms of players in the electrical power generation market, you have very large scale utilities that have tens of thousands of employees. We have hundreds, but since we're also producing power, we're actually doing the same job that those companies are doing with 20,000 employees. Obviously, they'll have more plants, they have more surface area, but we have all the same functions. So all of the people that have to do things for them have to do things for us, except we're not going to have kind of the org chart and breakdown. So we have to really worry about security in terms of data concentration. And kind of what that means is that in a traditional structure, you might have let's say, a senior director that approves things for a director, and director approves things for a senior manager, who approves things for a manager, who approves things for analysts. Well, in some of our silos, we may have a very flat organization. So how do you get the right separation of duties? How do you get the right security privileges and avoid people being overprivileged? Also, when you're in a flatter organization, people are wearing a lot of hats, all across the organization. So you end up with trying to understand what are some possibly toxic or less safe role combinations that people can have, as they have the ability to do this and they have the ability to do that. Because you're looking at, if one of these systems, one of these users gets compromised, how much is overall compromise. With big organizations, you have that's more compartmentalized. And so that's something that's kind of unique to some of your mid-size, especially high security organizations, is we kind of have this extra layer of having to really look at who's doing what happens here, because we basically can afford to lose or get fewer areas compromised, or just the impact of a compromise is a lot more possibly has a lot more impact to us. About wearing those separate hats, one of the things that has happened overall that is actually kind of a trend too is that the organization I manage is actually security and IT operations. Um, they were separate organizations. Most companies, you have your support and your help desk, you have, your operations people, and you have your security apparatus there. While that's a traditional structure, actually, what we've come to find out is that everything's security. All of our users are users of technology, and security has to be by design, and security is in everything. So your sysadmins are doing security, your support people are doing security, level ones, level twos. So it does make sense to combine those together, but that changes things quite a bit. We kind of changed from more a security function or cybersecurity to a resiliency function, which I kind of think is going to be sort of a new term. I think cybersecurity as a term, as a corporate buzzword, is kind of going to end up being passé after a little while, because I think that what we really realize when you have that synergy between your IT operations and your security together is that, well, everything's about just keeping operations running, just keeping the company running. You're not going to outrun cyber threats. You're not going to outrun, basic computer issues, user error, insider threat. What you've got to figure out how to do is that what needs to keep happening and what sort of protocols can I put in place to make sure things will just continue to operate as smoothly as possible while we eradicate the problem and get us, back to where we need to be, or just that becomes our daily norm. So more of the norm is becoming is that there is this compression of all of these traditional IT roles into a security role, because as we kind of merge those together, we had our security analysts, we had our threat hunters, we had our traditional system admins and developers, and it was like, well, guess what, good news is you're all security now. Everybody's a security person. Bad news, everybody's a security person. How do we actually get this accomplished? It's been a journey. I've talked to a lot of my colleagues. It's kind of moving in that same direction. And again, going to specifically mid-sized companies, we're not having the amount of employees and the amount of compartmentalization as other teams have. It's like if I go and talk to CISOs at major corporations, they're like, well, our red team, our blue team, our purple team, they're 20, 30 people. And I'm like, well, mine is Dan.
Yeah.
Because it's just, it's just the staffing reality of that. So there's a lot of things that are just, converging at once in terms of how that's going. And like I mentioned before, it's happening with the corporations too now. People are doing more with less. AI is, where do you want to bite that? Like, where do you want to start trying to mush that? But what it is doing is it's changing expectations regardless of where it's, how it's being used, or what the opinion is on it. It's definitely creating a situation where things are getting done in a different way. Things are getting done faster. You're having a change in how resources are being kind of allocated to tasks, because if there was a manual task that took 2 or 3 hours, and now because of some AI enabled tool, that piece of work is now down to 15 minutes, then, well, that's the new expectation, because no company is going to spend resources on something and take several hours when their competition can get this done in minutes. So that just moves it. So we're all having to adapt to that. Obviously, we're looking at ways to use it in terms of security and threat detection, and to go through a lot of routine tasks and automate things for us. But a lot of as a lot of people say, jury's still out on what it is. Is it a bubble? Is it going to be a thing? The only thing I know about it is the genie never goes back in the bottle.
That's right.
It never it so once a technology is there, it's gonna find its usefulness and it's not gonna go away. You're not gonna ban it, you're not going to banish it. That's just not how technology works. It's not something that we're gonna end up doing here. So those are, the biggest things that I'm looking at on a normal basis, on a regular basis. We're looking for that. We've had, there's a lot more vectors for data loss now. I think one of the interesting things is that I don't think it's brought up enough is that when a company has a data breach, the data that other companies shared with that company also come along with that data breach. So
Yes.
when you're looking at the data exchange and the data sharing between companies, and so necessarily in my company, we have to share a lot of information through a lot of different channels. It's not just that we're, exchanging ones and zeros. We have legal, we have compliance, we have other operations, we have business partners that we have to share information with. We have, risk managers, financial partners that we're doing everything from, yes, actually setting up an actual, data transfer to sort of like, Julie in accounting has to send Dan in compliance in this other company some list of our users or some, list of accounts to reconcile. So there's a lot of things that get, attached to emails send people send password protected, spreadsheets, and then just send the email with the password in the spreadsheet. So all of that back and forth, formal and informal, if you could have no breaches at all, but over a year's time, how much information have you shared just from necessary business operations with a third party? Well, what happens when they get breached? The the data, they're going to hoover up all that data. They're not going to say, oh, we're just taking this company's information. We're not going to take the company's information that they're partnering with. So obviously, we've had to start getting more aware of how we share information, what we share. And that's the thing because no one wants to be uncooperative, right? I mean, if
Right.
you've got a business partner and they're saying that, we need information on your users, we need to make them in our system, and we need to do this or that. That sure, hey, just pull down the whole HR, contact list and just ship it over to them. It's like, let's let's rethink that. Let's because what do you really need? And so a lot of the things we do are that like, well, how much information is really needed? Is this just for like, are you just verifying like a number of users? Are you trying to reconcile, but like if it's a 14-digit account number, what if I just give you the first four and just, redact out the rest? Do you need all the full names? Can it just be, Bill, Bob, Jill at, well, you know where we're at. That's the company that we're at. A lot of, and those things are, one, it makes it harder for the machine read. It's really geared for like human observation. And it just kind of puts up a little barrier that says, hey, there's less things going out. The other things that we do are this, we think about the channels. And so that's the other thing where why are you sending this 40 gig spreadsheet to this other company like every month? We could probably come up with a better way to do that that allows us to kind of control the information better, claw it back a little bit better, put it somewhere. So there's a real need and convergence that I'm finding where my security team needs to go out to just the operational roles and kind of go native and kind of sit with them and just say, hey, I want to know your job. I really want to understand kind of what you're doing because something that may make us go cringe, it's just daily thing for you. You've been doing it for 6 years. That's great, but wow, I really wish you wouldn't do that. And not only if I know more about what you're doing, I can help you, I can even try to make it easier for you and then I can also make sure that I can sleep better at night. And then we can all sleep better. So, that's been a big part of the sort of cyber resiliency, the sort of normalizing of the security function into all of IT, is that now we've become kind of a professional services organization with inside of an organization of, okay, let's go ahead and find problems that people don't even think are problems and see what we can do. Let's kind of, and again, with like tools, like we're like AI again, where we're, everyone's worried about language models sort of gobbling up all this information and what to do there. We do the same thing. It's that our users are going to want AI. They're going to want to use AI tools. There's only so much you can do with blocking them or forbidding them and finger wagging and writing policies that say thou shall not, put information in chat GPT. And we're like, well, you know what? Um, we just need to be the vendors of it,
Exactly.
the internal vendors, because it's kind of like that saying where, if you don't, the kids will go find it on the street. And we're like, well, let's not do that. Actually, let's give them options. Let's actually proactively go and say, hey, let's help you build a use case. What are the best things out there for it? And then how can we come to a comfort level with you using that in context of what you're doing? So, it's sort of carrot, not stick situation that we went through to be able to integrate the technology, but then still have some level of satisfaction and control that it's being used in a responsible way. And you only kind of do this with partnerships. And that's another thing about democratizing sort of the security function of it not being very aloof. A lot of companies have this. My company is not unique, where traditionally a lot of people look at the security guy, the security function, as just the person that comes to tell you no, just the person that comes and says you can't do something. If you see this person, you've done something bad, things are going to get locked down. Um, it takes a lot to change that. And, it's like, and again, I'm glad we were able to change it. And I like to see that. I like seeing that change where we're not seen as the fun, pretty much the corporate fun police. And I really, I didn't want to be the person that's like, I have no interest in being the fun police. We're not reading your emails. We're not checking everything you do. I'm not, putting a clock on how much you're looking at social media and my face is going to pop up and say, I gotcha. That we're we're really just here to make sure that you can be productive, that you can operate safely within the way that you want to operate and what you need to do. So, in that way, that's also why I think that cyber resilience has a better ring to it, because security always makes people think of a bouncer. Security always makes someone think of, authority. And we say, well, no, we're the resiliency people. We're like, there's things that are blocked here, things that you can't do. And the reason you can't do them is because those are good ways for bad things to happen. But if you can tell me why you need to do this, why we need to unblock it, sure. I mean, we're very reasonable. And that, and that kind of gets us into this conversation of invite us in, let us know what the situation is. Like we've slapped on all these layers for your own protection. Um, but if that happens to be a valid thing where it's like, yeah, but I want to get to that. Oh, well, cool. Because trying to go around us, this is our kind of hedge against shadow IT, is that um convincing our user base that it's much better to go for us to go with you instead of you trying to get around us, because you don't know what you don't know about all the things that we have in. So sometimes you get in runs where users want to procure their own systems or software or try to use systems or interact with systems that weren't like vetted or that we didn't have any heads up on, and they're like, it's not working, the functionality is not working. And we're like, yeah, I mean, we check for things like that. We block things that we don't know that are working here. What is it? But if you cultivate the right relationship, you get some good wins in, you show them where, hey, I wasn't gonna say no. I just needed to know how to configure things because um, we have security measures in place. It kind of gets you a long way. We do a lot at our company quite a bit with user training, user awareness, user development. I mean, it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, October here. So we try to do a lot about the awareness and education with our users on the why. Because a lot of traditionally a lot of companies, you're going to have some security training, some phishing, and some what you shouldn't do, what you can't do. Um, you have that, and we have some degree of that. But what we really took a turn in is that we're like, well, you know what? It might be more interesting and for the user and more beneficial for us. Why don't we explain? And so instead of just saying, okay, you're going to use two-factor authentication, you're going to have this thing on your device, you're going to log in and then it's going to, send you some number, you're going to type this number in, or you're going to, get into this other authentication, app or whatever. Um, okay, let's just explain to me like I'm five how multi-factor authentication works or how encryption works. So it's sort of a knowledge base so that then they feel a little bit more informed about the tools, the technologies, the techniques being used because they're literally getting an explanation that they could actually go and then tell someone, hey, my company does this because did you know? And we chock them full of stats and things like that. That's had a good rebound effect of behavior because now when we're giving them kind of a peek into just the dense forest of corporate protection and cybersecurity, it drives them to us when there's a thought of technology. So when there's a new project afoot and they're thinking in the financial realm of the project or in the operations realm of this project, they understand that, oh, we're using technology. We should probably call the guys that are always explaining the technology stuff to us to see if they have an insight. So we've done all of this to sort of earn a place at the table and at the meeting and a lot of things that are going on, not through, you know, not through brute force, but just by being helpful, like, literally internally advertising. I mean, we actually work with our communications department to actually just basically have internal PR of, how can we help you today? Like, what are you thinking about getting a new ERP system? It's like we have a lot of those sort of kind of posts and posters and things that go up that just say, hey, have you talked to your security guy today? Do you know what your system admin does? You know, that's how you get into your computer. So are you thinking about doing something that's going to have someone else kind of get into it? Are you thinking about sharing data with somebody? You know, so that's a good evolution. It hasn't always been like that. I've been with Pine Gate going on 4 years, and I've kind of been working in this industry since Y2K, dating myself a little bit. And, I've seen a lot of different structures. There's been a lot of different, I think, ideas on how IT groups work, how corporate security works. There's been a huge evolution in critical asset protection in the things that ultimately became the CISO role, which, you know, hasn't always been around and hasn't been front and center in a lot of places. So, I mean, I think we've come by all this honestly, where, there was an uphill to just convincing people that security was even a thing they worried about. I remember in this industry going back to the early 2000s, it was security by obscurity. When you think about like these giant like SCADA systems, the systems that sort of that run that utility operations backbone run on, these were really ugly, cobalt, like very arcane systems that people were specially trained to use that were, only had a function if you're, running a power plant or if you're running a public utility. And, the operators will say, and the passwords on them, well, if a password existed,
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. and it was shared by 12 people working rotating shifts. And an operator would say, like, who would ever want to be in this system that didn't have to be? Like, there's no reason for that. And that was kind of a prevailing attitude because really, who was? And also, you had a lot more closed systems then. We didn't quite have everything internet enabled. We didn't have everything syncing to the cloud. So there was an idea of like, well, I don't even think this is a threat. So selling security was harder. And then, lots of world events happened, lots of things happened. And we said, okay, maybe some security. Okay, maybe we'll make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 exclamation point. There you go. We'll do something like that. So, all the way to this evolution of now, okay, then we understood security is a real thing. Cyber threats are real, cyber crime is real, data loss and data breaches are real. So we understood all of that. And then now we're evolving to, well, yep, security, but security is a given. We all agree that we've got to have security. We all know that those things are out there. So actually, it's such a given that we're just going to go back to you're just the norm. It's just the norm that so why don't, CISOs are now just expanding and just taking over more of what was just traditional IT functions and traditional development functions. It's kind of getting kind of dripped into everything. So I think that there's another evolution afoot for CISO roles. Maybe in the next 5 years, maybe it'll take 10. I don't really think it'll take that long where it'll be another permutation of what we have now, where it'll be this sort of when you talk about an IT senior manager or a technology, at a sub CTO, CIO level, it's going to have a lot more birth because if you're developing software, well, you have to develop it with security in mind. If you're supporting software, you have to support it with security in mind. If you're adminning software, well, you've got to uphold all of these, role-based access functions, access control, user management, which is a big part of security. So all of those things kind of point back to, okay, security policies, security protocols, whatever frameworks, and what is your sort of risk tolerance and what is your perspective on what you're trying to secure and how you're trying to secure it, which then gets us over to sister functions like compliance. So to do all of that, then you have to have some level of classification on your data. So you have to know, what's important and what's not, because we get into this kind of conundrum of, well, if everything's confidential, then not, if everything's high value, then nothing's high value.
Mhm.
The same way when you're looking at sort of incident response, like, okay, everything can't be an emergency because then, there's you have nowhere to go from there. So that's again going back to the business functions and business units and saying, I've got a problem wanting to implement the technology and security we have, but you have a problem articulating what that is. We
Yeah.
need to talk together. We need to sort of chocolate peanut butter this in terms of what's happening. Like, what are the things where, secret, really, really secret, super, 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 super secret, and this thing doesn't move. Like this, like this is so secret, no one can even see it. Or, it's just locked down. I can't even get to it. No one can get to it. We got to have these levels because we have to have some sort of way to modulate what a threat is, how to apply things to, how to apply different security, and understand, what's normal and what's not. And that's another thing. It's like, okay, you have this. How are people using it? How often are people accessing it? Who should access it? Who shouldn't access it? Again, going back to this whole circle of how much data concentration do we have? How many role combos do we have? What kind of, you know, if we don't have a lot of roles, then how useful is role-based access control? Because if one person is wearing 6 hats, then well, we've got to find another way of figuring out who can get to what. And then also like, well, where can this stuff go? And is it normal that this data is being moved at 3 in the morning. I don't know. Maybe maybe that team's just night owls and they do stuff like that. So just, going and setting up those norms is really coming back to how much we're embedded in functions and how much our job looks less and less like just, sitting in a dark, usually dark room of cubicles in like a kind of a security, kind of sock, and more like having strategy meetings and sitting in a conference room, sort of whiteboarding things out with business functions of saying, okay, what happens if you don't get that data feed? Like, what happens to the business? Like, is it a mild inconvenience? Is it some manual data entry? Or are we talking about actual money loss, actual revenue loss that's happening there? And what should we be doing about it? It's like, how are we getting to those stops? And us kind of really getting several steps ahead of that. And, people saying, well, I thought security was, you guys, you come in at incident response level. You come in at the, oh, I think we've been breached. Oh, I think someone clicked on the link and got phished. It's like, if you're seeing us in incident response, if we're way too good at disaster recovery for you, then you don't have the right security team. Like we should be actually we should be miles ahead. We shouldn't be like kind of trying to pave the road in front of you that you're driving on. Like we should be way down there, like been there, done that, thought about that. And that's another perspective change that's occurred, is that understanding, no, we're your partners in understanding it. Yes, we will react to things, we will do those, but being proactive is a lot better than being reactive. And that it's not comfortable and it's not the best use of our time to be in reactionary situations. We wanted to prevent as much as possible. This is why there's things that you can't do that you don't even know you can't do until you figure out you can't do them. And you're like, why did you do that? And it's like, well, we did that to prevent you from yourself. And it's like, well, that was good because you know what? I did click on that phishing link and I would have done that. And it's like, yeah, this is why we're here. So this is why we talk to you we're on your calendar every month. We're going to say, hey, anything new? Anything you're thinking about? So, it kind of more, I've worked industry, I've worked consulting and back and forth. And this is that sort of model of I took a lot of what I learned from consulting back in and said, we're really going to model this like we're internal service providers, like we're internal consultants. We're going to do what consultants do, which is walk the halls looking for new opportunities, looking for ways to stay there and stay relevant. But we're going to take that same model and say, everyone on my team, it's like, find one thing that you can optimize a month, one thing that you can fix. Go learn about something that you don't know about. And like, what function of operations do you not know about? Go talk to the, crazy OT guys, or go talk to some engineers and, really get embedded in their world and just spend that first front of that time listening. Like just like have them over and just, have them, draw, all these things for you and just, tell you out like, okay, wow, we have a lot of field people and we go out and look at them and you would be amazed at how much you find out that doesn't really end up in the manual. That, oh wow, there are so many unprotected ports out here in the field because everything, I joke about this a lot in terms of Internet of Things. you know, it's, when the fridge in the break room has, a tablet in the door, and when, the microwave has Bluetooth, and, all of this embedded stuff, you find that everywhere. You find that in your satellite offices, you find it in your field offices, where you've got vectors everywhere because you've got commercial, monitors with Wi-Fi built into them. You've got smart lighting, you've got all these things, or you may have something that's just, some industrial, piece of equipment that's like analog in the field, but the new model actually does have a USB-C port in it because that's how you flash it and, update it. And we're just like, oh, but they're like, well, it doesn't happen very often. I'm like, yeah, that's not what I'm worried about. It's like I'm just worried about like wow, like we're not even, it's not even on our radar. So
Right.
we're finding out things new, but it's also sort of leaving things better than you found them. Is that okay? We come out here, we figured out what you do, you know, full respect for your role. What is it within our purview and within our power that we may be able to do to make this better? Even if it's just getting you a tablet, getting you a hotspot, doing some things that are just going to, or just developing you something that makes this go a little quicker for you. That's great. That builds a relationship there, and that makes them understand that yes, we're all in here embedded. And the best thing that we want, the thing that we want for you, we don't want you thinking about security. We want you thinking about, are you having the best, since we got to work, you're having the best day at work you can have, that it's actually, you don't feel like any of the company's working actively against you, or at least your IT group is not working actively against you to make your day harder in any way. And let's keep that conversation going as long as you're dependent on the technology. And so, we go through a lot of things. Obviously, exception management is kind of huge. And that was always tricky, especially, and this is, really particular to utilities. Um, you have a lot of disparate operations going on under one roof. And I mean, you could say that for any place, but you really do. So I mean, you're going to have things as different as, you're going to have chemists, and you're going to have, civil engineers. You're going to have physical security people. Actually, just like every function that you could have there, doing different things, from government affairs, legal affairs. So we'll have mathematicians, literal physicists, because it's big buildings that create lots of electricity. With all of those functions, it can become a situation where a security scheme, if you're trying to put everything in a box that may work for one part of the company or one function, actually just can't work for others, because you have such a different usage in the way people are using or interacting with technology. For instance, if you have, we'll have like GIS people, that are doing, engineering drawings, doing plan things. Well, they're high use people. They're using a lot of processing power to do these things. They need these, oversized, beefy sort of machines that are doing something that we would normally not have maybe the accounting department kind of use. I'm like, yeah, I don't, that's a little over. And in using things in parallel, or using a lot of virtuals, or using, actual like desktop machines. Wow, that's, crazy that people are using actual, real terminals for things. And, so we'll have a different, like a lot of different sets of things going on, and saying, okay, every function here necessarily doesn't fit into the same box. So how do we approach this? Because is it a one-off? Is it like, here's our baseline and here are the people that are getting exceptions? Or do we sort of look at this as, let's just look at this as no one's an exception. Everyone is their own baseline of what they're doing. And therefore they're set up differently. They have a different security parameter, and so we're using different benchmarks. We're just creating multiple flavors. And um it was really interesting because, it sounds pretty obvious, but that was one of the things that we realized was one of our biggest productivity stumbles. Was we were starting off trying to put everyone in the same box. Everyone's just getting issued this thing this way. This is a default for it. And then we would come back and it would just be, drip, 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 drip of, okay, do this, do this, do this. And, you look at it and say, like, okay, well, if no one is 100% on the standard, if only like 10% of the people are only standard, then it's really not a standard.
Yeah.
So we've got to attack this in a little bit of different way. The big thing about that is that again gave us so much more credibility with our users. They were like, "Wow, you finally get it. We're different now that we've gotten through that, now we feel like we can talk to you. Now we feel like you've got some credibility that we can come to you because we felt like that was the one thing that you're not getting is that yes, your engineering group, your GIS group, your chemistry group, your accounting group, your legal group, guess what? They have different needs. They're different functions and different people. And it doesn't matter whether you have 300 employees or 30,000 employees, we're different. And you've got to, talk to us differently, approach what we're doing in a norm. And the more that you try to sort of centralize us into a way of working, the more someone's going to resent because you couldn't fit everyone into this one size fits all situation. So we've learned, we've matured, and I think that's put us on this curve of convergence and kind of what security is. So I mean, I think I probably use the word security less and less. I think a lot of times that because I have people, ask, obviously, people want to, well, what's the best way to get into cybersecurity? What do I need to learn? Tell me the secret code, which exact certifications, what exact thing, can I do? And, I'm kind of like, well, there's a lot of things, but honestly, security looks so much less like security now than you think and and it's usually devastating, even just to tell them what it normally looks like as a CISO, because everybody thinks the Matrix, and they're what I'm saying. Everybody thinks we're doing that. And it's like no. I was like, one, there's a lot of writing, there's a lot of policy and reading, and there's also a lot of PowerPoints. There's a lot of explaining to executives exactly what you're doing and making the case. And I was like, and even more so now, since the security is actually kind of down to the IT, then the security people, look more like support people. And to do the support properly now in this ever complex world, the support people look a lot more like consultants of saying that, we're technology dealers. We're only going to deal you the technology that is the most secure technology that kind of works within the parameters that we're comfortable with. But at the same time, we're kind of like, hey, if we're like the guys are just like, whatever you want, we'll get it. We're those people, and that's really what the future looks like for them. So it's a different answer, but it's the truest answer I know how to give from where I'm looking at it right now, Matthew.
Yep. No, I love that. And it's funny because it touches on so many different, aspects of the future. And I see, where technology and security are going. And so, your explanation of it is so great. So it reminds me very much of Dark Trace. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's kind of like my new favorite thing. They are actually a really big company in cybersecurity, but they're AI based, right? So the bulk of it, the foundation is based on AI, and they're about 13 years old now. But now that everybody has come to where, AI is ubiquitous, everybody's thinking about it. Dark Trace is such a perfect fit because the interesting part is whether it's email, it's exactly what you think is like AI for security in email. Like, what should it do? It's examining all the email when it comes in, it's seeing all the little things that human eyes don't catch. It notices, it sets a baseline for every user. So it's like, you know what? Lemon doesn't write email at 3 o'clock in the morning ever. So it's a little weird that he's now sending out 12 or 1200. I'm just going to stop these because and also, this doesn't sound like lemon, right? So all the things
Right.
that you'd think, and then they even apply it to OT. They've got OT and network, and so it's really interesting. So as you talk about that, it brought me
Uh,
right to Darktrace. I'm like, this is exactly what you're describing, and how they even with the end user and the future of well, the end user now doesn't have to worry about the email because the only email that comes in is safe. AI has already gone through it and it catches it, and it's spectacular how great it does once it's got that baseline you were talking about, not just in the kind of you know in all the ways. Right now, it sees how you act, it sees how you write, it understands you at a baseline. So it's really fascinating. And I couldn't help but think the whole time you're saying it, it's like everything kind of, traced back to dark trade. I was like, that's crazy. So had to share that.
We're piloting a lot of tools like that right now. We're getting good results out of them. Um, I think that really is the future of what we're seeing. Like the things we like about them are you can even have sort of micro baselines of people in terms of like sort of time based of like, well, obviously there's a reason, for instance, that you can't send like 100 emails in 60 seconds to people, or you can't email 50 people all at the same time. Obviously, we have those parameters. Well, our users only find out they can't do that when they try to do that. And you're like, well, why were you trying to do that? So, so there's the dynamics of having something, similar to that that is looking for these patterns, it's making these micro adjustments into how people are acting. That's just saying that, like, you are acting a little weird, not weird enough to shut you down, but maybe weird enough to put you in a high risk category for the time being, or, and so, I'm going to cut off some of your access to some of the more sensitive information
Yeah.
now, just temporarily, just
Yep.
until your profile starts to act more like you. And if you're not after that for some reason, then you'll never know that you didn't have access to it in the first place. So the idea of these AI type enabled security tools making these micro adjustments in real time, that is something that we're very excited about. And it takes a lot of time away from us that it's doing it. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, testing parallel, like getting comfortable with what it's doing, but it has a lot of promise. And so I think we're going to have more and more of that. And the idea there is that, well, if those things are in place and you have, that are doing that job, it's not a threat to us. That gives my team more time for innovation. And it gives up my team, because people have, different opinions on it. We actually embrace it. We look forward to a lot of these AI empowered tools because we really are concentrated in making sure our business is successful. We really have to protect revenue more than ever before. We've got to monetize a lot more. We can't be a cost center. We can't be a forever cost center and, traditional model of IT. So we really have to look in that, how much actual, revenue are we protecting? How much are we actually paying our own way? And to do that, that requires that innovation. That requires that we get in there and do these time-saving things, and not in this sort of fuzzy number avoidance way. Well, we avoided that phishing attack, and so we technically saved you $300 billion. No, no, what we're really like are like that. So here's something that we actually did where there's cyber liability premiums. You were here, we introduced all of these controls. Those controls got factored into your premium and your premium dropped. Well, that was real. That was a had not for, and there was a real dollars that went to there. These are real things. These are measurable things that we're doing more efficient. Like when we partner with these groups and with these teams. So, that's a big deal. And so because I want them working on innovation, the AI tools that can do a lot of the security work and kind of automate that in ways that's a huge game changer for us. That's a huge winner for us, especially once they get really trained and tuned, like you said, knowing what the users are. And yeah, but sort of the biggest feature that I really like is for it to make adjustments in real time. Like, we can set up security profiles and we can set things up, but when something's able to make, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 adjustments, in a minute to multiple user profiles of predictively, kind of shutting down threats,
Yep.
that's just a level that, we can't replicate. And therefore it's like, but we're really happy to have. I mean, I just no one on my team has fingers that fast. We can't actually, be doing these profiles. And the fact that we can actually go in, go through the thought process of it, and this is, I guess, one of the last thoughts I'll say on AI and like the one you mentioned, is that it's, you can actually very much audit the thought process it's going through and what it's doing. It's actually not a black box. And I'm really clear about that as kind of being an advocate for AI is it's not a black box. If you have a question about what its thought process was, you can actually just go through and interrogate it from the front or the back and say, okay, this is what it's doing. And if you don't like those assumptions, you can get assumptions that will accommodate what you're doing. That's one of the things that I find, and I think that's maybe one of the misconceptions is that, well, if you have AI, it's just, it's Skynet. It's just completely just doing the things. It's like, no, it still, it still follows, the the laws here in terms of it's doing what it's programmed to do, and it's doing what you've asked it to do, and there is a step through of the logic that got it there. So I think, again, unavoidable. We've got to find ways to actually make it useful, and that is one of the best applications for it is security management and automation.
Yeah, for sure. Lemon, this has been an absolute blast. I can't thank you enough for coming on. But before we wrap up, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about Pine Gate Renewables?
All right. More about me. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Lemon Williams, and my LinkedIn is LCH Williams 23. That's a handle on most of my public-facing social media. And Pine Gate Renewables is pgrenewables.com, based out of Asheville, North Carolina. And I would love to hear from you if you do drop me a line. I'm pretty chatty if you can't tell from this podcast.
That's awesome. Well, you made my job easy, and I loved having you on. And until next time, Lemon.
Matthew, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.